The ex-Everton man, Kevin Kilbane. Bright and early, Kevin. Hope you have the coffees in over there, yeah?
No, just a water this morning, honestly. Very sensible today.
Listen, tell us, we have broad support of this appointment from Kenny, and certainly Shay Given, having worked with Frank Lampard, thinks he's the right man for the job. What do you reckon?
I was actually quite surprised that he got the job, given the size of the job that's actually going to take to get Everton going again. If I look at the previous managers and the money that's been spent on the club, it's going to take a real experienced guy. That's how I felt in my mind, that was going to turn the club around. Personally, I probably would have liked to have seen, once Benitez got the job, to have given him that season, 18 months or whatever it was going to be. But I always probably felt in the back of my mind that Benitez wasn't going to work out. So after Benitez left, I just felt as though they needed somebody that was really going to come in, someone with Everton had spoke about it themselves. Farhad Moshiri had spoken about a manager with real Champions League experience, a coach that perhaps had even won things in certain at certain levels. That's not necessarily the criteria that I would be looking for, but that's what he'd spoken of. And then for him to turn to Lampard with his inexperience, I just felt personally that they might have needed someone with a bit more experience, given the size of the job that's needed there.
So did he not show enough for you in his time at Chelsea to suggest that he can do the job at Everton?
No, not really. I'm not saying he can't do the job, but as I said, I mean, I think at Derby he had one of the biggest budgets in the Championship. I think you could argue that, I know he took them to a playoff final, but you could argue that he perhaps underachieved there at Derby, that he maybe should have done more with the squad of players that he had at Chelsea. We know the talent that was there at Chelsea. So I think he was always going to be competing for a Champions League spot. So to get them into that position, I think that was probably always very attainable for Frank Lampard. I'm not downplaying anything that he achieved, because you still have to do that job. But I think going into Everton, it's at a different level. That given the circumstances that's been around the club, of course there was the power struggle with Marcel Brands and Rafa Benitez. Benitez won, and then he goes only a number of weeks later. So you can see the problems there. The wage bill at Everton, the players that they've got in there at Everton, it's everything's changed. The whole club has changed over the last 6 or 7 years since Farhad Moshiri has taken over. So no, personally, I just feel that it would have needed someone with a little bit more experience there to take the job. So I don't think you can really judge the job that he'd done at Chelsea going in there at Everton. No.
How's it going, Kev? Sav, good afternoon. I'd have to say I'm always a bit disappointed when I see you without your Mayo jersey on. I always feel a bit let down. Listen, Kev.
Good morning, Kenny.
Sticking on Lampard, in terms of, be interested in terms of the perception amongst the Everton supporters. You'll know them best. So important you get the supporters on side very quickly. Now, I know kind of performances and results will dictate that to a certain extent, but generally speaking, in terms of the perception amongst the Everton supporters, that Lampard's appointment, how do you think it'll go down?
You know what, Kenny? I think he'll absolutely be given more leeway and more time than Benitez. There was no matter what anyone says, and Kenny, you know as well as I do, you probably have the same sort of thinking. Any manager can do a job at any club. And Benitez going in, there was a feeling of, with his Liverpool connections and everything that went with that, I don't know. It seemed to me, Kenny, that it was always destined to fail. That was my feeling on it when he got the job, given what one or two comments that Benitez had made about Everton over the years. So he was always up against it, is what I'm trying to say. With Lampard, he absolutely will be given more time. I think there is a feeling with the coaching staff that he's brought in. Paul Clement, I think, is a very good appointment. Ashley Cole, I know I've been working with Lee Carsley with England under-21s. Again, relatively inexperienced in coaching circles, but there's one or two people that he's brought in around him that I think can help the team progress over the next year. So, as I said, just in answer to the question, though,
how do you see the balance of the team, though, Kev, in terms of the quality? I mean, I look at it myself. I don't think it's perfect in a lot of respects. A little bit unbalanced, particularly in that central half position. I don't think they're quite good enough, but there's some real talent distributed around the team. I think they're a better team than what they're shown. Certainly, their position within the within the table. That's probably one of the reasons why Lampard's taken this on. He probably sees a team which is underperforming, and with his coaching staff that he has around him, I think you're right, Paul Clement. Interesting, he hasn't brought Jody Morris up there. He's gone for somebody who's more experienced. I think that's important for a young manager as well, Kev, that you're talking about, the support network of people, coaches that you have around you. That's really important. That looks a little bit stronger this time around. But do you think that squad is better than what it's shown at the moment, and you can actually get more out of it? I don't think there's a huge amount of money. You spoke about Mashiri and the investment, Kev. It looks as if he's pulled the reins in a little bit in terms of the money that's going to be spent. So it's going to need a good coaching setup in there to get the very best out of players available. Do you think there's more to come from that group, which is there at the moment, than what they're showing?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there, Kenny, I've got to answer there. But I think, I think you talk about he has tightened the purse strings, absolutely has. But Kenny, Everton's wage bill, Everton now have gone from paying players, 2 and 3 million, 4 million a year maximum, to paying 6 and 7 million a year to certain players in the squad. They have moved on to a different level, and I know it doesn't guarantee anything, but success is deemed off the back of what you're going to be spending. Everton have spent so much money under Marcel Brand. I think there was 300 million spent, Kenny, coming into the club, and that's the side of wages. So, the players that you've brought in, they should be doing a lot better, absolutely. I don't rate the goalkeeper. I don't rate maybe the two centre-halves in terms of where they see the club as a top six. That's where they see Everton. I know there's a lot of candidates for the top six places, but Kenny, wages-wise, Everton have been competing with Tottenham and Arsenal over the last few years in terms of what they can actually pay across the board or across the squad for players. So seriously underachieving, absolutely. And maybe at the top end of the field, Richarlison, he has been hit and miss at times. I like Richarlison. I think with Calvert-Lewin, I think there was something that was building there over the last year or two. So hopefully that combination can build again. But Townsend, I think Damari Gray have done okay. I like Damari Gray. I think he's a player that can get better. But I think they are risky transfers that they brought in, Kenny, given that Dele Alli hasn't really performed over the last year, 18 months, maybe 2 years. Van der Beek hasn't really worked out at Man United, so he's got a lot to prove. That might be a good thing in his respect. El Ghazi, I liked El Ghazi when I first saw him, when he first went into Villa, but he's a player that probably needs to get back to that level again. So the risky transfers that they've brought in, as well as the players that they've got. So I don't know, Kenny. I think that, yes, in answer to your question, I think they are underachieving, but there's still a lot more to come, I think, from the players in the attacking department.
What about those signings then? They seemed a little bit left field. Certainly the Dele Alli one on a permanent transfer is an interesting one.
Yeah, I think so, but that's reflecting the fact, Kev, I think there's no big fee there up front, isn't it? The fee only kicks in after a certain number of games. You're only really taking his wages on. I agree with you, Van der Beek. I don't potentially see long-term, maybe future at Everton, but Everton could take advantage of that, him coming there and being motivated to go and prove to Manchester United that he's worth a place in that Manchester United setup, maybe for the next Manchester United manager coming in next year, and Everton could reap the benefits of that between now and the end of the season. I take a risk on Dele Alli. I take your point in terms of he's seriously underachieved the last couple of years, but there's a real player in there, Kev, isn't there, in terms of how he played previously, that his partnership or Harry Kane for a couple of seasons was absolutely phenomenal. He's still only 25 years of age, Kev. I just think you have to get inside his head, and this is why when I talk about Lampard, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Benitez, but we all know Benitez is a bit of a wet fish when it comes to managing and massaging people's egos in the dressing room. I think Lampard will be a bit different, Kev. You know how important that is, particularly the likes of Van der Beek and Dele Alli, maybe a little bit mentally fragile coming to the football club. The type of player Lampard was, that attacking midfield player, and just his manner with players. I don't know what you think about Lampard, how you perceived him, Kev. I always felt as if very much a man's man, good within the confines of the dressing room, and somebody which other players would kind of row behind very quickly. So I'm backing Lampard to get into the heads of those players and actually get it torn out in between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think listening to Shea, of course, who's worked very closely with him, has spoken about these issues or not the issues, but these characteristics and these good traits that Lampard has in dealing with players individually. I looking at the balance of the side with signing Van der Beek and Dele Alli and Damari Gray, Andros Townsend. I don't know how he's going to fit the players in. I don't know what sort of system and which he's going to best suit those players, Kenny. I always felt that Dele Alli was best just playing off the left-hand side where he'd float into a number 10 position and get himself into those goal-scoring positions. And, that's how I always felt that Dele Alli played his best football, not necessarily specifically as a number 10. Whereas Van der Beek, he'll be a player that bombs on from midfield or plays as an 8 or a progressive 8 in there. Who's he going to sit? Will it be Allen that's going to sit? Will it be Gomez that's going to sit in that midfield? It's probably going to be a 3-man midfield with one sitter, I'd feel, going forward with that side. Calvert-Lewin, whether or not he's destined to go anywhere else, it looked to me that Arsenal are pursuing him, and it looks as though that could be a transfer that could be done down the line, but we'll see. So how's he going to fit all this talent that he's got into the side in the final third? The real worry would always be, Kenny, you touched on it, and I've already said it, would be the back line. They've conceded far too many goals given what's been spent. As I said, I don't really rate Jordan Pickford. I think there's better goalkeepers that they could be going for elsewhere. So he just doesn't instill me with confidence and a calming influence over his back four. So I think there's a number of question marks, but yes, I think he's a manager that could get into one or two of the players' minds that haven't necessarily been playing well to get the best out of them or get a tune out of those players.